Perhaps a long-lost sister of Lae'zel. This Githyanki monk named Blazel has dedicated her life to being the shining light that burns all who come within her reach. Fire is all she knows and all that she craves, and instead of following the way of the 4 elements, she forges her own way of the 1 element. She knows little of the material plane and knows even less about the customs of the world known as Faerun. After being tadpoled, she tries to find her salvation through fire and flame. Before I go through the whole build, I just want to point out this is a thematic build. It's supposed to follow a single theme, and also an attempt at trying to make a 4 elements monk build that doesn't just rely upon Tavern Brawler. I know Tavern Brawler is amazing for monks, but that's old news and not something worth making a build video about, especially since the game has been out for over a year now. So yes, we are starting as a monk. We've picked Githyanki. This is just because there are actually Githzerai. We don't have Githzerai as a race here. Also gives her access to Misty Step and Enhanced Leap at one point. The extra weapon and armor proficiencies don't actually come into play for this build. Anyway, for her abilities, I'm starting with an odd score of Dexterity and Wisdom. This is just so that when I do get to use a feats, these will go up to an even number. We do also get access to the Mage Hand cantrip. That isn't really part of the class, it's nice to have. And Astral Knowledge is a very strong class action. Well, it says class action here, it's really more of a race action, I suppose. So you can choose to gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability, for example, all the skills in Charisma. That lasts until long rest, and she can change it after another long rest. This does end up being a multi-class build with 1 level in another class. I'll get to it when it's time. The first 5 levels are going to be in Monk. Whenever you multi-class, generally, it's worth going 5 classes in a single class first, because level 5 is where the first power spike comes. So the subclass is Way of the 4 elements. 1 element really, though there is one exception to that. So we're looking for the fire abilities. So Fangs of the Fire Snake kind of carry you in the early levels. It's quite good at adding damage. Falls off a bit towards the higher levels, sadly. Sweeping Cinder Strike, Burning Hands, Sphere of Elemental Balance. If we're going to use this, it's going to be the fire version. At level 4, as I said, we're going to use one of our feats for an ability score improvement. Dexterity and Wisdom up by 1 each. The Dexterity helps us to hit and our armor class. The Wisdom increases the spell save DC of the 4 element abilities and also helps us with our armor class. Kind of a two-way thing there for 4 element monks. And as I said, level 5 in monk, this is because we get extra attack and stunning strike, both of which are very powerful indeed. I would really say at level 6, we're only going to take 1 level in one other class. Let's get it out of the way. I'm going to pick Ranger. This is mostly for 2 reasons. 1, I want to have fire resistance. Yes, I could use an elixir, but a bit like how I don't want to make a build about Tavern Brawler, we also don't want to make builds that rely on consumables too much. I will very quickly admit that elixirs of fire resistance, for me, seem to be the most common elixir I find or can craft, so it's not really too much of a problem if you just want to use an elixir. For the favoured enemy, I just think Sanctified Stalker fits this build. None of the others are really needed either. None of these really come in that useful for the build. This is kind of a bit of a wasted choice here because we're not going to be using Ensnaring Strike. We're not really going to be casting Protection from Evil and Good. For proficiency, she's a Githyanki. She can just use her long rest ability if she wants to. True Strike is not a good thing to go for. Again, for the proficiency here, she's got her racial ability. Armor proficiency and heavy armor is not useful. We're not going to use heavy armor. So here I've gone for this one. The proficiency, as I said, isn't so useful, but maybe want to go with Sacred Flame. Kind of fits the theme of the build, kind of fire, flame. I think it works out okay. We get to pick a single skill. I'm going to stick with Perception. This is quite nice because it gives us proficiency in the Wisdom skill and we've got a decent Wisdom, so she's going to be pretty perceptive. As we level up, all of the rest of the levels will be in Monk. So we're going to go for Fire, Embrace of the Inferno, Scorching Ray. Nothing to choose at level 7. We do get Evasion, which can help us actually just throw fireballs at ourselves. And Stillness of Mind, this is just both of these are monk abilities. At level 8, we get our second and final feat. And just because it fits the theme, not because it's necessarily the strongest thing we can do, I'm going to go with Elemental Adept Fire. And I think it's kind of important for her because of all the damage types, fire is one of the most resisted. And this helps us ignore fire resistance. Unfortunately, and this is one of the problems I'll probably talk about again later. Unfortunately, the monk abilities, the 4 element monk abilities are not spells. So this thing about you cannot roll a 1 doesn't apply, which is really sad, but does let our spells and attacks ignore fire resistance. And then we get to choose another ability. Now, unfortunately, there are no fire abilities left. I'm going to go with Clench of the North Wind, and this is because actually I found a problem with it, but we'll see this. One of the subclass features here is we have improved elemental casting. So our Clench of the Four Winds can hold an additional creature. Embrace of the Inferno fires an extra ray. Some of the other offensive abilities deal more damage, an additional dice of damage. But the problem actually, what I've found through testing, I've tried this on different save files just in case. I don't use mods, I haven't used mods, is my Clench of the North Wind hasn't actually been affecting a second creature. Anyway, so here's Clench of the North Wind, and I can only, well, I can target one, and then the ability just works. I should be able to target 2 people. It's a bit sad. Anyway, if you do manage to hold someone, finish them off if you can. We keep going through the levels, and then at level 12, a level 11 in Monk, one more choice of spell. Thankfully, another fire spell turns up, Flames of the Phoenix. Right, I like to go through my items next before showing off the build inside a couple of combats. And before I go through all of the items, I'm just going to swap one over. There we are. I try to find items that are not in Act 3, or not too many of them in Act 3. Because by the time we get to Act 3, over half the game has been completed. And it kind of seems pointless to always make builds where the items are in Act 3, because everyone's already very powerful by the time we get to Act 3 anyway. I like to choose items from Act 1 and 2 predominantly where I can. And I've gone for items again that fit the build of either a monk, or fire, or flame, or maybe light in one of the cases here. I'm going to go through the items in order of when you find them. So the early items are going to go through first. The later items will come up later. So starting with the Cinder Shoes. These come from the Myconid colony. You can just buy them there. Whenever you burn an enemy, you gain 2 turns of heat. So what does heat do? Engulfed by a vengeful fire. Takes 1 to 4 fire damage each turn. This is why we wanted the fire resistance, by the way. But you could use heat convergence. Oh, what's this? Consume your heat to fuel a powerful attack. The next time you deal fire damage, you deal an additional 1 fire damage for every turn of heat remaining. Unfortunately, the maximum number of stacks of heat we can gain is 7. So we can add a maximum of 7 fire damage. If the stacks of heat wasn't limited to just 7, this build and any build with heat would work much better. And the way this works, it says the next attack. So actually, if I use Embrace of the Inferno, that extra damage is only added to the first ray that hits out of the 4. Fortunately, if we use an area of effect attack, such as Sweeping Cinder Strike or Flames of the Phoenix, the +7, if we have 7 stacks anyway, gets added to the damage against every single creature. So it's much more effective to use heat with an area of effect ability rather than a single attack. It's not common that she burns enemies actually. She can try and burn enemies using this. That's about it really. That's about, of all the items she's got, that's the only consistent way she can burn enemies, but there we are. I gave her Guiding Light. There weren't many rings that really fit the theme, but Guiding Light is found in the Arcane Tower and gives you the light cantrip. And this is actually kind of fitting for Githyanki because they do not get dark vision. The Graceful Cloth, this is just an amazing piece of armor, probably the strongest item I've got here in this build perhaps. Buy this from Esther near the Triatal Crags. It gives you an extra 2 to your dexterity score, which is why it was okay for this build to leave her dexterity at 18. It's gone up to 20 now. +1 bonus to dexterity saving throws, that's nice. Increase your jump distance by 5 feet, that's great. And you gain Cat's Grace. This is amazing. All your dexterity skill checks are now done with advantage. So if you're stealing, lockpicking, you have that advantage automatically every single time. I think this is a very strong cloth. You can get it so early on, it's great. Those are the only Act 1 items. So we're going to move on to the Act 2 items. The order in which you get these depends on your route through the game. There's no set route, so you might not actually follow the same route as me. So starting with the Thermo-Arcanic Gloves, and this is very important for the build. Whenever you deal fire damage, thankfully it doesn't say from spells, any fire damage, you gain 2 turns of heat. This is where a lot of the turns of heat will come from. This comes from Cansif. I now generally go to Cansif very beginning of Act 2 and just kill him and kill the Drider, but you might do it a different way. Then in Act 2, I'd pick up the Cloak of Protection. The problem with this particular item is maybe other characters want it, but I couldn't find another cloak that was good early on. Anyway, you can buy this from the Last Light Inn. Same thing with the Thermo Dynamo Axe. So whenever you deal damage with this weapon, you get 2 turns of heat. One thing I forgot to say about the Ranger earlier, this is a bit annoying, I should have said it then, is Ranger gives proficiency with all weapons. So this means as long as a weapon doesn't have the two-handed property, Monks can attack with it using their dexterity score instead of their strength score. The downside to this weapon, it's only got a +1 enchantment and it doesn't really do anything else. But it's going to be another source of heat. The gloves and the weapon are really the main sources of heat. The Hat of Fire Acuity. Whenever you deal fire damage, thankfully it doesn't say with spells, you gain arcane acuity. I've gone through this in another video. This increases your spell attack rolls and spell difficulty class, and this is also found in the Last Light Inn. So we're getting there, we've got most of the items covered, just a few more to go. Next, the Ring of Self-Immolation. So as a bonus action, once per short rest, you can set yourself on fire to gain 2 turns of heat. So if you're running low on heat, use your bonus action. The downside to that is monks love the bonus actions. So maybe you want to do this if you're really struggling for turns of heat. This can be found on the Ruined Battlefield. Put a link to the items in the description. Next up is Fire Hearts, found in the Wraithwind Toll House. So whenever you take fire damage dealt by another creature, you gain 2 turns of heat. In my testing in Act 3, this hasn't happened very often. It hasn't actually made this necklace give me turns of heat. But again, it's just about the build. I'm trying to make sure I can get stacks of heat as often as possible in as many situations as possible. Next up, the Hellfire Hand Crossbow. This comes from Yrgir. Now this is towards the end of Act 2. Possibly inflict burning when hitting a creature with this weapon while hiding or invisible. I mean, that can happen. That works well with the shoes if we make an enemy burn. I don't think this build is going to do a lot of damage trying to hit people using this crossbow. What's really nice about it is we get the Scorching Ray shot, and it shoots out 4 rays of fire, and thankfully our feat also applies to the fire damage from this crossbow. The other hand crossbow is just a hand crossbow +1. This is just in the event I want to use it with my bonus action. It's not likely to happen, but if I can have 1 hand crossbow, I should just have 2. The one Act 3 item I've got in my bag is this Cinder Moth Cloak. This comes from Act 3 in the lower city sewers. You're not even going to get it in Rivington. It's quite late. But a creature that damages the wearer within 7 feet receives burning. That's very powerful and kind of completes the build, because if an enemy burns, and if they're close enough, we get 2 turns of heat. So we can be building heat outside of our turn. An alternative set of gloves, the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle. Your unarmed attacks deal an additional 1d4 fire damage. That really fits the theme of the build, and there's a whole set of gloves available basically for monks about unarmed attacks, and also gives us another use of Scorching Ray. I'd probably swap these around. These are also available from Lady Esther, the same trader as you would buy the Graceful Cloth from. The downside is it means whenever we deal fire damage, we aren't gaining 2 turns of heat. It'd be lovely if we could have like 2 glove slots, or 1 glove of each, because I want to add fire damage to my unarmed attacks, and I want to gain heat when I deal fire damage. These two maybe I'd swap around. So there we have it. I'm going to be going out into Act 3 using the Cinder Moth Cloak just to show it off.
Swift exit may be in order.
So I'm walking into a holy place, and this is where the fight will start. I need to start building turns of heat. I might try that through opportunity attacks. I can just set running here. Yeah. Alright, that didn't work out. So that's fine, it's not a problem. So this turn I'm going to start building turns of heat. I'm going to try and hit these enemies. I got 2 turns because of the axe. And again, 2 more turns because of the axe. That's kind of it for this turn. It's not a huge amount. Now we've got to be careful. One of the downsides of 4 element or 1 element monks is their key usage. I'm just going to go for a simple unarmed strike. So it's the next turn. The number of turns of heat goes down by 1. These 3 are set up very nicely, or these 3 over here, for a Flames of the Phoenix. It's going to be easy to hit those 3. I want a bit more turns of heat. I want a few more turns of heat, so I'm going to self-immolate. Now I'm up to 5. I can use my heat convergence. It now highlights which abilities this will help with. Flames of the Phoenix, making sure not to hit Astarion there. So I rolled 8d6, pretty good, 32, not bad really, and then added +5. And the nice thing is, even if they pass their saving throw like this enemy did, the damage from the dice that I rolled, the 8d6, is divided by 2, but then the heat convergence damage is added after that. And that's really useful because that damage isn't halved. So if I got up to +7, this would have been 17. Not bad. Respectable. I'm not going to save the day, but it's okay. It's okay. The downside is it used 4 key points. I can only do that 2 more times. So one of the downsides of this build in particular is you're probably going to be short resting after every single fight. This is a situation, I just want to show something off. Where moving is going to make me take many attacks of opportunity. I could step the wind disengage. That uses a precious key point. Just going to use this on myself. So because of the evasion ability from monks, this is kind of one of the worst situations that could have happened in a way. She failed. She failed her saving throw by 1. Bit sad. And it says she was hit for 16. It says 32 here. What isn't shown is that because of this evasion ability, even though she failed her saving throw, she only takes half damage. Now, she has fire resistance, but she also has an ability that ignores fire resistance, which means they cancel each other out. And again, key is precious. I've got a bonus action left, so why not? Oh well, we missed. Not the end of the world. I'm going to keep everyone alive for one more turn, I think. Interestingly, water elementals are not resistant to fire. Who knew? This time, I just want to show Fangs to the fire snake. So I added 1d10 fire damage, and now my next attack will add an extra 1d4 fire damage. So if I hit this lady here, there we are. I actually got some turns of heat from the weapon itself, and then from the gloves, because I actually dealt fire damage. So now I'm at 7 turns of heat. Unfortunately, I can't make much use of it right now. And the good thing about the Fangs of the Fire Snake is that extra fire damage goes until the start of your next turn. Now this lady's held.
Blood follows me everywhere.
So we're going to get critical hits. Which, although I rolled badly, Fangs of the Fire Snake damage also gets an extra dice rolled, an extra die rolled from 1d4 to 2d4. My stacks of arcane acuity are very high, but when it comes to my next turn, I'll show you why actually there's a bit of a conflict between some of these items. We're on 7 turns of heat and 8 turns of arcane acuity.
Another fight. Let's go.
And so the number of turns of arcane acuity went down to 5. That's because every turn we lose 1 turn of arcane acuity, and every time we take damage, including from heat, we lose 2. So we're not going to have a high number of turns of arcane acuity for very long. It does mean now that our spells and abilities have a relatively high spell save DC. 20 there. It doesn't show it here, but it is 20, and that's very respectable. Boom. Ha! Ended up with a critical hit as well, which is very nice. Although it didn't show it in the ability bar down here, the hotbar, we did get that extra 6 damage from the 6 turns of heat. Also, the arcane acuity really helps that attack hit. But I'm out of key points. Yes, I could have finished that fight sooner if I had actually used the other characters more frequently. I've got no short rest left. And as a 4-element monk, we do also get this Harmony of Fire and Water. Let's get back half of our key points. We're going to get back 6. That's okay, but it's only once per long rest. So it's not going to save you a lot of key points. Something I forgot to do, actually. Let's do that, make myself light. I did play about with the Callous Glow Ring, thinking, oh yeah, we can do extra damage. What ended up happening is that the turns of heat would do the 1d4 fire damage and then the extra 2 radiant damage because I was lit up. Amberly isn't very happy with me, so we've got into a fight, and in this situation where the enemies are grouped up together, there's not an easy way to get lots of turns of heat very quickly. I'm just going to use the ring. Because I probably won't get another chance, but all these Sahuagin are so close together. It looks like I'm going to have to get close, but I don't think it's worth worrying about that. Hey, why not? Let's give projected ward, shall we? So we do have to use the opportunities where we can to damage as many people in one go. But that's it. That's her turnover. Not much more I can do with her anyway. One of the sad things about the 4-element monk abilities, actually, let's just show you this in tooltips, is they count as class actions. So class action is not a spell. And this is really sad because it means some items, such as the Hat of Pyro Quickness, which would give us an extra bonus action, don't work. It also means meta magic doesn't work. I can't use meta magic to like twin Clench of the North Wind or quicken one of these abilities. It has to be a spell. It also means multiclassing just doesn't work that well with monks, 4-element monks in general, and we need as many key points as possible. And another downside is one level in another class means I don't get the final feat. So yeah, I know this is not the strongest build. I know a Tavern Brawler monk, open hand monk, maybe 8 or 9 levels, the rest in Rogue, Thief, would easily outclass this build. So you let me know if any of your fun thematic builds. Would you make any changes to this particular monk? Oh, come on, Gale. And let me know what you think of 4-element monks. Because, yeah, they don't get a lot of love. For, I think, very clear reasons, in all honesty. So, thank you for making it this far. Here we are, Destructive Wave. I love this spell. Thank you to all the members of my channel. And hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.